How to Successfully Integrate WebQuests into an 8th Grade Science Classroom by Lindsay Friedman, Bowling Green State University. Upon entering my Master's of Education in Classroom Technology program, I became interested in WebQuests early on. I didn't really know what they were and really didn't know what it included. However, early on, I was asked to create some of them for various classes, and then I started to create some on my own. And when I was creating them on my own, I really started looking at them and thought of all these great things that a WebQuest had to offer, because it offered some meaningful lessons in real-life application. Furthermore, in a technology-inclined society, I felt that WebQuest had numerous benefits. Therefore, I created an action research plan based on the research question, how can I successfully integrate WebQuests into my 8th grade science classes? Bernie Dodge is the creator of the WebQuest, and in 1995, he provided a definition. And that definition is a WebQuest is a unique inquiry-based Web 2.0 teaching and learning tool where students primarily use the internet for research to inquire about various topics. Again, as I stated earlier, the WebQuest has numerous benefits, and using the internet for research is just one of those benefits. Other benefits include cooperative learning skills. When students create a WebQuest, when they participate in a WebQuest, they're utilizing cooperative learning skills in order to complete various tasks set forth in the WebQuests. Each student has to take an active role in his or her learning, and they also have to take an active role in completing the tasks. Therefore, students have to learn to work together, and they have to learn to help each other out. And that is just one skill that is covered in using a WebQuest. Another benefit that is fine-tuned is information literacy skills. Information literacy pertains to the ability to search, locate, and evaluate and use information effectively. When one participates in a WebQuest, he or she is given a set of websites, but then it is up to that student to actually search through those websites to find the information. Once they locate that information, they actually have to take it a step further and evaluate that information. They have to take that information and say whether it's good or bad, or how can they use it? How can they use it to make a decision and to create a solution to a problem? And when they do this, they're actually using higher order thinking skills. Higher order thinking skills refers to the process of a student learning new information and expanding upon this information for academic purposes or for problem solving to aid in further comprehension of new information. So when a student is taking this information and evaluating it and analyzing it, not only are they practicing information literacy skills, but they're also using higher order thinking skills. They're taking it to another level. They're not just learning new information and putting it into their brain and hoping that it sticks in there. They're actually taking it and doing something with it. They often times have a task of learning the information, but then making decisions, drawing conclusions, making inferences. And that's what uses the higher order thinking skills. It's that taking it a step further. It also allows students to use problem-based learning skills. And this is a process where students engage in identifying a real life or real world problem and then searching and analyzing solutions for that problem. And WebQuests offer that. More often than not, WebQuests are going to start with a question, and it asks the students to research answers for that possible question. Therefore, they're using their information literacy skills to locate the information. Then they're using their higher order thinking skills to analyze that information to create a solution. All the while using cooperative learning skills, because they all have to take a part in completing the tasks of the WebQuest. Therefore, I decided to implement WebQuests into my classroom. And I did this by creating an action research plan that took place in a classroom of 8th graders in a suburban urban Midwest community. All 8th graders in my classroom participated in 3 WebQuests. However, I only chose 5 to be my sample group. And I chose the sample group based on some criteria. One criteria was the student engagement, and the other was student academic abilities. Of the sample group of 5 students, I chose based on student engagement. Therefore, I took 2 students who were actively engaged on a daily basis, who are students who raise his or her hand. They're constantly offering discussions and answers to questions. And then I chose 2 students who were on the opposite side of the spectrum, who were often not engaged, who were working on other homework for other classes, had their heads down, fiddling through papers, and just were not concentrating on the subject. And then I chose 1 student who was in between. Sometimes I could get this person to be engaged, other times I could not. I also chose these 5 students based on the first half of the school year. And I chose them also on academic abilities. I chose these students based on grades through formative and summative assessments, and also on observation. It is important to note that the remaining 8th grade students participated, and they did it just as the same as the other 5. However, they were not study subjects. I did not utilize their information, but every single student did participate in all 3 WebQuests. In order to collect data on this action research, I used 2 instruments. The first one was the student behavior checklist, and it looked like this. So I put the students' names up at the top up here, and then I just took anecdotal notes as they were working. And the other item I used was a teacher-created survey, and this gave the students the opportunity to provide feedback after each WebQuest. And then I wanted to make sure that I actually had valid and credible information. So I used triangulation and peer review to establish my internal validity and credibility. Triangulation refers to looking at something from multiple perspectives. In order to accomplish this, I used the 3 surveys from the sample group. I used student behavior checklist, as I just showed you, and then I also collected the data multiple times. It was not just during one day, it was every single day of every WebQuest. I also peer reviewed it. I took my information and I shared it with my colleagues in my school, and I asked them for their opinion, any advice they could provide me, any feedback on what they thought of it. I made sure I had qualitative data. As data from the checklist was recorded, I used thematic analysis. I actually coded the student behavior. I coded it based on whether they were actively engaged, participatory, or unengaged. I also grouped the survey questions on possible themes as well, such as enjoys WebQuest, does not enjoy WebQuest, enjoy group work, does not enjoy group work, and suggests a change. And after I looked through those responses, I coded them that way. The first WebQuest was based on genetic mutations. And the first WebQuest, this is what it looked like on the home page. I included all the standards that are covered. I took the students through an introduction. There was a task process that gave the overall outcome. The process page, which defined each item they had to complete and how to complete the tasks. I also had some electronic copies of documents they needed to look at. There was an evaluation page. So it showed how the students were going to receive his or her points. There was a conclusion page where they could find more information. And then there was also a teacher page that gave advice to the teachers on how to implement this WebQuest into their classroom. My conclusions on WebQuest 1, as you can see, I went through each day and I said whether the students were actively engaged, participatory, or unengaged. And if you notice this figure 1, the table above is a summary. If you actually look at the action research itself, in my appendix, I have a detailed listing of the student behavior checklist for each single day and for each single student. And then after the first WebQuest, they were to complete the first survey on SurveyMonkey. And I took survey 1 through 5, or excuse me, student 1 through 5's answers, and I coded it on whether they liked the WebQuest, whether they didn't like it, what they thought of the group work, and what they suggested as a change. You will notice I had 4 students that actually liked the WebQuest, 1 student that did not, and then that student that did not like it also didn't like working with groups. And then I have my changes here. Based on the suggestions of my changes, I decided that I was going to have the students work in partners for the second WebQuest, and then I eliminated roles. Those were the 2 major changes that I made in order to see if that would actually change the outcome of the student behaviors and then also on their opinion of the WebQuest. The second WebQuest was called Interfering with Nature. Students had to research the term GMO, or genetically modified organisms, and then they had to make some evaluations and decide whether they felt GMOs should be allowed into plants that we eat, such as fruits and vegetables, or if it is something that we need to ban. And so they had to take on the role of looking at GMOs, doing some activities with that, and then they had to create a persuasive business letter saying whether the GMOs should be allowed in food or not. And again, it also has an evaluation, conclusion, and teacher page. As you can see, this was a little bit lengthier with my observations because it did take longer to complete. And then again, I have my student feedback. Again, I still had 1 person that didn't enjoy the WebQuest and 1 person that didn't like the group work. And lastly, another person that had some suggestions of changes. The changes this time would be students would work in partners, or excuse me, students would work in groups of 3 instead of partners. And then the final project would require something using the internet rather than writing, because I had a lot of students that did not like the writing. And again, I removed the roles. The WebQuest 3, you can notice that most of them did like the last WebQuest the best because there was a project involved rather than a final essay to write. This one was based on designer dogs and selective breeding and whether designer dogs should be allowed. So they had to research what it meant to be a designer dog. They had to figure out whether it was humane or not based on the information provided. And then they had to create a digital project that promoted or demoted the use of designer dogs. And again, it also has an evaluation, conclusion, and teacher page. And then here are my results for the feedback. On the last one, again, they all seemed to really enjoy this WebQuest the most. They enjoyed the groups of 3 rather than the partner work and the roles. The only thing that I would have to say about this is the authenticity. I only had 5 students as my sample group instead of everyone, and perhaps using more students would have given me a better idea. Also, some students might not participate just because they didn't have an interest in it. So that could also have a benefit or a bad thing. Recommendations are I would continue to have the groups of 3 rather than groups of 4. And then lastly are my references. Thank you for watching.